And so if there we go.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Carly. So if you would like to turn your camera off, that's perfectly fine. Also, we encourage you to remain on mute so that we don't pick up background noise from your home. And we encourage you to use the chat function to ask any questions. Carly's going to be monitoring the chat, and we will try to make sure we get through all of your questions before the end of the webinar. I want to start off by thanking our conservation partners and co-sponsors. Lisa, you want to go to the next slide and then the next one? Because they're bigger on the next one.
Yes, and we don't have to promote the next one because here we are. If I can get it to go forward, that would be great. It's
All right.
simply
Anyway, our
not
conservation partner.
cooperating.
Oh no. Oh no. We haven't had
There we
issues.
go. There we go.
There we are. Okay. Our conservation partners and co-sponsors that working here in the region, Avalone Land Conservancy, the Connecticut Department, Energy and Environmental Protection, Connecticut Land Conservation Council, Eastern Connecticut Conservation District, Eastern Connecticut Forest Landowners Association and Wolf Den Land Trust, Joshua's Trust, Naturally Natchog, New England Forestry Foundation, Opakam Land Trust, Wyndham Land Trust, and Yale Forests. All of these co-sponsors and conservation partners are stewarding thousands of acres of open space, and the land trusts are continuing to acquire and manage and protect important parcels every year. They really do keep the green in the Last Green Valley National Heritage Corridor. But there's a lot more work to be done, and that's where you as landowners come in. As we've said in our previous webinars, more than 60% of the woodlands in Connecticut and Massachusetts are privately owned and for the most part unprotected. So it puts a lot of responsibility on landowners like you for stewardship and conservation. So if you love your land, you're here in the right place. And we hope you're able to take something away from these three webinars. So tonight, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have Lisa Hayden. She is currently the Director of Outreach Engagement for the New England Forestry Foundation, and her work focuses on woodland owner education and building partnerships to advance conservation and sustainable forestry as part of natural climate solutions. She joined New England Forestry Foundation in 2014 to lead the Landowner Outreach Initiative in the 38-town Mascon Woods in northeastern Connecticut, South Central Mass, our region, connecting landowners with resources to make long-term plans for their land. And since 2021, she served as the administrative agent to the Woodlands Partnership of Northwest Massachusetts. It has a mission of forest conservation and nature-based economic development in a 21-town region. And I will note, because it's about to happen very soon, Lisa will be coming back to Northeastern Connecticut. She is the first and brand new executive director for the Wyndham Land Trust. So we're happy to have her back working in the region.
I'm excited too. Looking forward to it next week.
Yeah, starting next week. It's awesome. Our main speaker that we're going to start off with is Amy Blaymore Patterson. Amy has served as the executive director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council since 2010. Under her guidance, CLCC has grown into one of the most influential land trust service organizations in the nation. Prior to her tenure at CLCC, Amy was a project manager at the Trust for Public Land, where she managed complex conservation transactions. Her extensive background in law, with a focus on land conservation and environmental protection, includes over 20 years of experience as an attorney, including tenure with the U.S. Department of Justice. She has a BA from Franklin and Marshall College and a law degree from the University of Denver. She's truly a leader in the conservation field, and she is in demand. Amy serves on more boards, councils, and advisory committees than I can count or have time to list tonight. And she's been recognized by many organizations with awards because of her service. So, Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can kick this off. And thank you to everybody who's here on this webinar tonight.
Thank you so much. You know, when I hear about college, it just seems like a really long time ago because it was. So thanks for that reminder about where I went to school. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and here. Give me a second. All right, and just need to get this in the right. Oh, wait a second. Sorry. There we go. Here. And here. And here. There we go. Just let me know when you can see everything. All right. You got the title screen? You got the title slide? Perfect.
Yep,
Okay.
looks great.
Thank you all so much for having me here tonight. I'm going to show you the agenda in a moment. But I want to say that, you know, because as Lois had mentioned, you know, having been an attorney and I still am a licensed attorney, but I don't practice, I just wanted to let you know that right from the get-go, legal advice is not anything that I can provide to you this evening, but hopefully the information that I provide will be helpful to you. And, you know, between me and Lisa and Lois, who's also an attorney, I think we can probably answer a lot of your questions. And if not tonight, we can certainly follow up with you. So again, delighted to be here. I've put together a very ambitious agenda, and I figured it was best in an hour's time to just kind of gloss over a lot of different topics, knowing that you can dig down deeper into any one of these when you start to consider some of your conservation options and you start to get the advice from the professionals that are going to help you. And even before that, when you start hopefully working with a land trust or other conservation organization. So these are the topics that that we are hopefully going to get through tonight to cover. And it really does just go to those basics around estate planning considerations and really conservation options for you as landowners. So I'm not going to read these to you, but I'll give you a second just to get a sense of where we're going. So our organization, very quickly, in a nutshell, as Lois said, we are the statewide land trust service association for Connecticut. Most states have an association that serves as a service provider. At CLCC, we provide a host of services to the land trust, and in Connecticut, we've got about 120 of them. And our services range from technical assistance, financial assistance, a lot of convening, a lot of networking opportunities that we provide for the land trust to get to know each other, to learn from each other, to work with each other. And we also advocate on behalf of the community at the Capitol. Yesterday, we had a fabulous land conservation day, and the turnout was great, not only from the land trusts, but from the legislators and the governor, lieutenant governor. We just had a great showing of support there. It was very, very exciting. And here's our mission statement and vision statement. Again, I don't think I need to read those to you. There's plenty of information about us on our website. So quickly, I wanted to give you just an overview of land conservation and goals, the goals for land conservation here in Connecticut. We have by statute set a goal in Connecticut of conserving 21% of our land area. And by policy, through the Connecticut Green Plan, which is not statutory, it is a planning document, the goal had been set to do that by 2023. By statute, the 21% total is broken out by 10% being conserved by the state of Connecticut and 11% by conservation partners. And that means, in the context of the statute, land trusts, municipalities, and water companies. I will tell you that we haven't met the goal. We're about 77 in total, about 77%, probably closer to 80 now, 80% of the way there. But at the rate that we are conserving land here in Connecticut, both mostly from the state's perspective, but also through partners, it's going to take decades to get there. So, of course, we continue to move forward. We continue to be as aggressive as possible in saving land. But it becomes increasingly more difficult as time goes by, with the pressures being what they are on our already dwindling land, both natural lands and working lands. So most of the conservation partners, like I said, are private landowners, like many of you here tonight, individuals, will work with our land trusts, other conservation organizations, municipalities, and state and federal government partners as well. But our indigenous tribes are also very important partners when it comes to conserving and stewarding land here in the state of Connecticut. So I can't see everybody, so I won't ask for a show of hands, but I was going to ask you, does everybody know what a land trust is? I'll take 2 seconds to remind you in case you don't remember or you don't know at all. And a land trust is a community-based nonprofit organization, and it works with willing landowners to conserve land through various means, mostly through just the transfer of land, and we're going to talk about that in a second, through fee simple title or through a conservation easement agreement. And the difference between a land trust as a nonprofit and many of the other nonprofits that are out there is that land trusts were created for the purpose of upholding their mission in perpetuity, meaning forever. Land trusts also, once they take title to land or they hold the easement on the land and in coordination with the landowner, they also manage and steward the land in accordance with different plans and practices. So like I said before, there are about 120 land trusts in Connecticut. The property ownership ranges from very small quarter-acre parcels in urban areas right up to 1,000-acre landscape scale projects in various regions of the state. We have a map on our website. It's called Find a Land Trust, and the website is ctconservation.org, which is written there on your screen. And it's nice because if you just click on a town, you'll see, as I have there for Stonington, you'll see the land trusts that serve that particular town or the region. And because we have 120 land trusts and only 169 towns, it's pretty good, pretty good chance that you will find a land trust that serves your town. I think there's just only a handful that doesn't have a land trust serving the town, either as an individual land trust or as a regional land trust. And you can again, we have links to their websites and other information about each of the land trusts. So I'm going to focus, when I'm presenting tonight, I'm really going to be focusing my comments through the lens of working with a land trust. But most of what I say can apply to also working with a municipal partner or a state partner as well, if you're choosing them as a conservation partner, if you're considering protecting your land. So just quickly, and I'm not going to look here because, again, I don't want to have to go back, but I would love to know if you just quickly put in the chat, what does your land mean to you? And what about your land makes you want to conserve it? Just take a minute, and Carly, you can be our timekeeper. But it's always fun and very interesting to hear what about their land really excites people and makes them want to consider conserving it.
Sure. We'll give people some time. Eric Thomas said connections to the past, bridging to the future. Very nice.
We always say that when you conserve the land, you are conserving both the physical history on the land, or about the land, as well as the oral history that goes along with it. And the best thing is when we hear stories from landowners about their property and why it is so important to them.
Bill Reed said protecting natural resources and family legacy.
We could just go through one or two more. I don't want to take too much time, but it is always it's always so nice to hear what about their land what about their land makes it special to a landowner.
Definitely.
So while folks are writing, if they're writing at all, I'm going to advance to the next stage. But here are so many of the reasons why people choose to conserve land and why it's so important, both from a whole host of different reasons why it is so important, from economic benefits to community benefits, financial benefits, ecological benefits, and so much more. And historical benefits are all part of that as well, Eric. So totally agree. And one of my favorite things to do is to take a walk with landowners or the land trusts that have just acquired land and hear the stories that make these lands so special. So before I talked about the different ways that land trusts can acquire land, and one conservation option would be, as a landowner, to basically transfer all your rights to a land trust in your property, basically transferring title. It's like if you sold your house. You sell your land, and all right, title, and interest goes to the land trust. You don't own it anymore. That's the bottom line. You don't own it anymore. You have no rights, etc. There are some exceptions to that. You can transfer title to the land and retain certain rights that are personal as between you and the land trust, but those rights will extinguish upon a certain trigger and not run with title to the land as an easement would. And I'm going to just continue to move through. And of course, if you have questions, probably we're going to wait till the end. Lois, are we waiting till the end for questions? But you could put them in the chat, right? Yeah.
Yeah, put them in the chat, and I think it would make sense to wait till the end.
Got
And
it.
then we can get through all the questions.
Okay. And I'm being very mindful of time. I have,
That's okay.
am I good? You'll give me a
Good. Yeah.
sign. Okay, terrific. The second option, and these are not the only two options, and I'll allude to a few more as we move along, but these are the main options. And the second would be a conservation easement. And that is essentially an agreement between the easement holder, which would be the organization that you would be working with. In this case, again, I'm using Land Trust as the holder, and then you as the landowner. And within that agreement, you specify certain rights that would be transferred to the easement holder and certain other rights that remain with the landowner. When we say transferring the rights to the easement holder, it doesn't mean that they have the right to do it. It means that they have the right to enforce the agreement to make sure you don't do those things. And generally, the things that you are agreeing not to do are things that will impact conservation of the property, most predominantly developing it. But I will tell you this, that conservation easements are extremely flexible. They are subject to a negotiation between the land trust and the landowner. And it is so important for you as a landowner to make sure that, you know, what your vision is for the property, how it is to be used, what rights you want to retain, and what rights you want to give up are accurately captured within that easement document. And it is a terrific conservation tool. And Lisa, I think you can talk more about that, especially in the context of the work that you do at NEF. But conservation easements are very common. And when land trusts receive funding from the state or federal government, particularly the state here in the state of Connecticut, there's a conservation easement that is placed on the land. When the land trust even purchases title, it'll be subject to that conservation easement. So even a land trust is going to be taking title subject to restrictions that are placed on it in favor of the state of Connecticut. So you as a private landowner can do the same thing with a land trust. You can retain title and then have your property protected through a conservation easement. And we put together this chart here that just kind of lays out the distinctions, very gross distinctions between fee simple transfer and conservation easements. So who owns the land after closing if you transfer by fee simple? The land trust. Who manages the property if you transfer by fee simple? The land trust. And public access, will that be allowed if you transfer your property to a land trust? Usually, yes, but you don't own it anymore, so it's not a concern of yours. And if it would be, then you would be looking at a different conservation option. Similarly, with a conservation easement, you as the landowner would then own the land after closing. Who manages the land after closing? Generally speaking, it's you, the landowner, through an agreement with the land trust. Public access allowed? Typically, no. But again, there are some exceptions to that as well. And again, the beauty of a conservation easement is there's some times where a landowner really doesn't want to manage all or all aspects of the property and will negotiate with the land trust so that those types of services are provided by the land trust as the easement holder. But the land trust's main role in holding an easement is to make sure that the agreement is, that the landowner is doing everything in accordance with the agreement, and in particular, not violating the terms around development that would undermine any of the conservation values. Right. So there are some other conservation options. There are different types of easements, which we won't go into here, but everything ranging from agricultural easements, which really relate to working lands that are in production, right down to forever wild easements, which basically are saying nothing is going to happen on that property. Basically, you know, with the exception sometimes of removing some invasives, this property is going to remain forever wild. Sometimes, especially if there's a transfer of property by deed, a covenant, a restrictive covenant will be placed on the land records after the fact. So the deed is recorded, a restriction, a conservation restriction is placed on the land records after the fact. There are some issues with that in terms of enforceability, but it is definitely an option that one can talk about with their attorney if they don't want to do a conservation easement, but they want to have some language on record that makes sure that their intent to see the land conserved is upheld. Right. So how can you, what are the estate planning mechanisms that you can use to conserve your land? So we would advise you always to talk to your attorney and or your financial advisor on what mechanism works best for your situation. Of course, you can leave property, fee simple to a land trust in your will. You can also convey a conservation easement upon your death in your will. You can set up a trust now. It can be a living trust. It can be other types of trusts that would allow for the passing of the conservation easement or the property itself upon your death. But it could also be a trust that holds the property now and is one that, again, can be used as a mechanism as part of your estate planning, if that's better to do it now rather than in the future. You can set up a limited liability company or some family partnerships to take ownership of the land and then transfer it when it makes sense, again, in accordance with your estate planning needs. And then there are some other tools that don't take place immediately. An option to purchase would be an agreement that would be triggered by the buyer. So you give a land trust, I don't know, a year to exercise their option to purchase the property. That can be used as an estate planning tool as well. If conveying the property right now isn't in your best interest, and you can wait by giving an option to the land trust that can be exercised in the future. Similarly, a right of first refusal would be when it's your time to sell, you're ready to sell. You've given the right of first refusal to a land trust who was the first one in line to make that decision of whether or not they want to buy the property. And all of the terms of that would be part of an agreement. And I had alluded to this before, you can transfer title to your property subject to certain retained interests or retained rights. And in this case, what we have here is a life estate. Let's say you would like to stay on your property and live there for the rest of your life. But upon your death, you would like that to go to a land trust. So you would retain a life interest in the property, and upon your death, the full title to the property, the interest would be extinguished and the full title to the property would go to the land trust, and they call them remainder men. Okay. You know, it's funny, as I say all this, I realize that every single one of these topics could be a workshop in and of itself, honestly. So sit back, don't get overwhelmed, and just kind of take it all in as best as you can. We have a really nice guide that I have a QR code, and if anybody wants a hard copy of it, just contact me. And I know the Last Green Valley has one as well. And these are really nice guides. And in our case, and I think in yours too, Lois, they are basically stories told by landowners who have decided to conserve their land. And they tell them, you know, they tell the different conservation options that they've chosen and why. And it makes it a little bit more relatable than this kind of dry presentation of information. So again, don't feel like it's just drinking from that hot fire hose. This is meant to just be a touch on each one. So you don't want, let's say you don't want to donate your land. Of course, you can donate your land. Land trusts love it when a landowner will donate their land, but many landowners can't do that. So if you want to sell your land, there are, you can sell it for fair market value. And we'll talk about how that is determined in a minute. And are financing options for land trusts to purchase land at fair market value. I think a lot of landowners are under the misconception that the only way to protect their land is to give it to a land trust, donate it. But that's not true. In fact, most of the land trusts that we work with purchase land, and many of them purchase it at fair market value. But you can also sell your land with something called a bargain sale. And a bargain sale is when you sell the sale price, is below the fair market value. The land has to be owned by the landowner for 1 year before its donation. So if you purchase land, you want to turn it around and then sell it, that's not going to work. In order to get the tax benefits, you have to own it for more than a year if you're going to sell it and try to get those tax benefits. So those are some of the ways that you can sell your land and not have to donate it if you're looking for some cash in exchange for your property. And again, there's money out there for land trusts to take advantage of. There's a couple of others I have here. The donation with a lifetime income. That is a donation of land in exchange for a life income agreement, which in other words, it's also known as an annuity. So that would give you some installment type payments over time while you are alive. And there's installment sales as well. Sometimes a deal is structured so that a series of payments over time are provided to you as a landowner rather than one lump sum. And that spreads the income and any taxable gains that you might have to account for over several years, making it better from a tax planning standpoint. So just to recap, estate planning mechanisms, there are lots of different tools. If you don't want to convey your land now, and you want to do it in the future, wills and trusts are definitely a way to do that. If you want to do it now, but you want to wait for a trigger event, you can do an option agreement. You can do a right of first refusal. And then, according to your counsel, it might be best to set up an entity, a business entity, to hold title to the land for tax purposes. But again, that is something that you would discuss with your financial advisor and or your lawyer. Okay, so what are some of the tax considerations that you might realize or take into account when you're deciding which mechanism to use and how to convey title and by what financing mechanism? So if you transfer title to your land, then you won't have real estate taxes anymore. You'll have to pay income tax, and so a bargain sale is one of the ways to lower the income tax, because the difference between the fair market value and the bargain price may be considered a charitable contribution, which could help offset some of your income tax that would be realized on this. If you chose to go the easement route, that is a way to reduce taxes in a couple of different ways. When a conservation easement is placed on your property, it should decrease the appraised value of your property. That does depend on towns. Sometimes you got to push them a little bit. Sometimes it just happens. And that is because it has removed the development value of your property. So the overall appraised value and assessed value should go down, and therefore so should your property taxes. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can hear my puppy in the background. No, good. Income taxes. Again, a donation or a bargain sale may be considered that charitable donation and could result in the reduction of the federal income tax. By the way, the appraised value of your property is, especially on an easement, is on the before and after. So they're going to look at the difference between the before price and the after price. That will determine the value of the easement. And for an easement, you may deduct up to 50% of your adjusted gross income in any given year with a carry forward of 15 years. So those are some tax benefits you can realize from the conveyance of an easement, and also from just conveying title to the property. And you should also talk to your if you're thinking about doing this through a will, Estate taxes can also be reduced, can also reduce the value of your land, especially if you put a conservation easement on it, even if it is post-mortem. If it's by your will, an easement goes on the property, it can reduce your estate tax liability. So there's some really, really meaningful tax benefits that can come from land conservation. And I would encourage you to explore those with your financial and or legal advisor when you are considering what the best mechanism is for yourself. How are we all doing out there? I can't see anybody except for a few faces. Lois and Lisa, they're still awake. That's a good thing. All right.
We
All
got a
right.
thumbs up from Eric Thomas, so I think we're
Oh.
doing pretty good.
That's good. All right. This is, like I said, this is so much information. But now let's look at the deal itself, just putting the deal together. What would that look like if you were to sit down, you did all of this homework, you've met with your financial advisor, you met with your legal advisor, and most importantly, you met with your family members and the other people that are interested in what's going to happen to your land. And you said, okay, this is what we would like to do. So you can sit down with the land trust, you have that conversation. And when the land trust says, yeah, we can do that, we're ready to work with you. We're ready to accept a conservation easement, or we're ready to, take title to your land. We'd love to do that. Let's put a deal together. So the first thing that you would do, and this is just kind of the list, and then I'll break it out, but you're going to enter into some sort of an agreement. Sometimes it starts with a simple letter of interest or a letter of intent. And that just kind of basically memorializes the fact that you're interested in working with each other. Usually it's legally non-binding, but it's a good faith start to moving forward with your conservation transaction. And for many land trusts, it's a very important document because it is a piece of paper that they can show a funder to say, hey, I've got a landowner here and they are ready to go. They want to work with us and we're going to start to move forward in pursuing this conservation transaction. The next thing you would likely do is enter into the more formal purchase and sale agreement, which would memorialize the terms and the conditions in writing. And that would be filled with conditions that would be on your terms and also on the land trust terms to make sure that this deal is going to work for both and that there is truly a meeting of the minds when it comes to the outcome. Let's see. What do I have next here? So let me move due diligence. Now, before I get there, let me talk a little bit about some of the title search. So a title search is what a land trust is going to do in order to make sure that the title that you have in your property is free and clear from encumbrances or defects, meaning something that's going to interfere with their ownership and use of the property. Now, many properties have mortgages on that. And so that is something that a land trust needs to know up front so that it can be determined that, yes, in the case of a sale of the fee title, that you as the landowner are going to have enough money to pay off whatever mortgage is on that property. So the land trust is taking title free and clear. But let's say the land trust is going to purchase a conservation easement. Well, you're going to still own title to that property. They're going to hold the easement. And so they're going to have to make sure that that mortgage is not going to impact their ability to purchase that conservation easement through the funding sources that they are going to use. So those are the types of things that an attorney is going to look for on behalf of the land trust to make sure that there's not going to be anything to create problems when it becomes the legal owner of the property or the holder of the easement on the property. All right, let's see. The next thing would be appraisals. Do I have a slide on appraisals? Yeah, so again, the appraisal is going to make sure that whatever purchase price is agreed upon, either for the easement or for the purchase of the property, is one that the land trust is legally able to pay you. And if it is anything above fair market value as determined by an appraisal, the land trust is very limited in terms of how high it can go in order to pay you that price. And that is because it's a nonprofit. And there are all sorts of rules that prevent a nonprofit from really doing anything that is going to benefit somebody personally. So the appraisal is very, very important, not only for making sure that the land trust can legally pay up to that purchase price, but it's also important when it goes for funding, because many of the grants that a land trust will be seeking are conditioned upon an approved appraised value of the property. Right, let's see. These are some of the other due diligence elements that land trusts are going to need. The survey, sometimes the property, you'll see it in the purchase and sale agreement as a condition, and it usually comes at the end. But the land trust needs to make sure that it knows exactly the boundaries of the property that it is purchasing to make sure that there are no problems with it. I just dealt with a land trust recently that was looking very seriously at purchasing a piece of land. It was listed for sale at like 67 acres at a certain appraised value that was approved for 67 acres. When they went out and they did a preliminary survey, they found that it actually was only 40-something acres. And of course, that would change the appraised value. And in that case, it was pretty significant. So those are the types of due diligence exercises that land trusts need to go through. Similarly, some land trusts, actually most now, will do an environmental assessment. They'll do a record search and they'll have that done just to make sure that there's nothing questionable on the property that would pose problems for them down the road. And then we'll get to some of the other, the baseline documentation and the stewardship in a minute. So a purchase and sale agreement is going to have these elements in there. They're going to have a provision on due diligence that's going to allow the land trust to go through the exercises that it needs to do in order to make sure that this property is acceptable and that there are no issues. And generally, it allows the land trust the opportunity to get out of the agreement if there's something that cannot be rectified. And for landowners, it's a good thing too, because you need to know if there are any issues with your property for future reference as well. Okay, so conservation permanence. These are two items that I started to say before. When you are going to sell land outright, a land trust is going to want to put a management plan together, and these all occur so that your wishes in conveying the land on how it is to be stewarded and make sure that it's protected forever are going to be upheld. So land trusts will undertake, and they don't all do it, but they should be undertaking a management plan. They should be, and these as a landowner, these are some of the things that you should be asking a land trust about and talking with them about. Is, what are your plans for the property? How are you going to manage it? These are the things that I would like to see as a landowner continue on the property. These are things that I would rather you not do on the property. And that can also be captured in the purchase and sale agreement, but it can also be then captured in the management plan. One of the things that landowners and land trusts talk about is a stewardship fund. Sometimes land trusts, and actually most of the time now, a land trust is going to say, we're going to need some funding in order to maintain the property in the way that you would like. And so if a landowner in particular is going to donate a piece of property, you still might be asked to provide some funding to assist the land trust in managing the property or stewarding it in the way that will uphold your wishes. As an owner of property, land trusts have to annually monitor it to make sure that there are no problems with the property, no trespassing on the property, nothing that is going to hinder the conservation values on the property that you as a landowner have entrusted to the land trust. So all of those things that you see here, those all happen after you transfer title to the property, that the land trust is, you're entrusting this land trust with really to be the new owner of this property, and therefore to make sure that your conservation wishes are upheld. With a conservation easement, it's really not that much different, except you still own the land. And so the difference here on this ensuring the conservation permanence of the property is that the land trust is going to undertake a baseline documentation report when it purchases the property. And what that means is it goes in there and it basically when it takes on the easement, it means that they're going to take a snapshot of the property as it currently exists. You own it. It looks at the property. It says all of these things are in place. Then it is going to still monitor that property. And if they see any violations, anything that has changed that undermines the agreement that it has entered into with you as the landowner, they have the right to enforce the terms of that easement to make sure any of those violations are removed. I'm dying to say, does anybody have any questions? Please put your questions in the chat. Okay. So I do have a case study here, but I'm going to skip it. It is 7-Eleven. I'm going to skip the case study, but I'm going to come back if we have time. It's a beautiful property. It's a great case study for land trusts, but I have a better case study that I want to talk about later that really I think will be more relevant to you as a landowner to better understand, how deals can be structured, what portions of properties, you can retain, what portions you can give to a land trust, how you can mix and match a bit. So I'm going to move on to this. So here's my summary. You are going to determine what you want. What is it that you want to protect in your property? That is something very personal to you. And that is a conversation that you have with your family members or whoever else is involved with the ownership of this property. Once you have done that and you really are secure with what you want to see happen, you can then find a partner. You can find a local land trust or a regional land trust or any of the other partners that I alluded to, including the state, including the town, and then talk to them about how they can assist you in realizing your land protection goals. The land trust will will review those conservation values with you. They will assist you in determining what the best conservation option is. Is it for you to convey the property outright to the land trust? Is it for you to transfer an easement? You're going to sit down with your legal and financial advisors. You're going to talk about both of those options or some of the others that I quickly went through. You're going to analyze those based upon what you want for the property, what you want for yourself personally, and also what's best for your estate planning needs. And then you're going to work with the land trust to draft that agreement, and then you're on your way and start doing and allowing them to do all the due diligence that I just described, and then talk about the stewardship and management of the property to make sure that those are memorialized and in place so that you feel really, really secure and really, really good about the decision that you made to work with that land trust. And I have to tell you, I wrote here a close and celebrate. There is nothing more exciting for both the land trust and the landowner than to sit down after going through this process that I have made, that I have summarized in 45 minutes? That often takes years. It often takes years to get through. And when you get to that closing table and your wishes and dreams for your property are realized and you have a partner in your local land trust, it's a great feeling. So I hope that I didn't provide you with too much, but I really wanted to just give you that snapshot of what a conservation transaction looks like, what your options are, and how important it is for you to make sure that you know why you are protecting the property and what the best mechanism is. Again, I mentioned this before. We have a couple of and you can take a screenshot of this or, just take out your camera if you want, if you don't have the QR code reader. But these are two publications that we offer. The first one is what I was alluding to before, and that tells stories by landowners about how and why they protected their land. And it also weaves in some of the terms that I talked about here tonight, but it puts them really in the context of an actual land deal, which is really nice for landowners to see. And then what is a land trust? You might want to read a little bit more about land trusts, what they do. And please visit our website and you can find a local land trust and talk to them as well. That's it. No questions, I'm sure. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Catch my breath.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, that was great.
Yep. And Amy, we do have on the Last Green Valley resource page where we have both of your publications as well as a link to your website. We also have a companion publication that we also list that has summaries of the land trusts that are working in the region. Now, it's already out of date. We've had a couple changes in some of our land trusts recently. One of our local land trusts, New Roxbury Land Trust, has merged into the Wyndham Land Trust. And some of the contact information is a little bit out of date now, but our publication does have a summary of all the land trusts that are active in the area and a little bit about their priorities. And I think, Lisa, you're going to talk about that a little bit too, in that, not every property is going to be attractive to a land trust. So you do need to really think about your goals and to try to find the right entity that's a good match. Some land trusts don't really like to take easements because they can be difficult to monitor and difficult to enforce. On the other hand, there might be a federal funding program or a state funding program where an easement is a better option. So you have to do a little bit of research on each land trust to understand a little bit more about their priorities. And I think, Lisa,
Yeah.
go ahead. I can turn it to you.
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of that Venn diagram, right? About between both you as the person interested in conserving your land, what your goals are, and the reasons why you love it, and also what's special about it, maybe ecologically or certain, characteristics of the land or the property that might make it interesting to the land trust partner. And so, there's organizations that we all work with, like the Nature Conservancy, which really focuses on rare habitat types for plants and animals and, like listed species and things. And they're the experts at doing mapping to know where on the landscape those habitats exist. And so they probably have their own priority list as to, oh, we want, certain parts of this town or whatever we know is important to us. And you may not know whether your land fits in that category or not. So I think that underscores the importance, as Amy was saying, to reach out to these different land trust potential partners, learn about what their missions are, and see where it might be a fit. And then some of the other examples are New England Forestry Foundation, where I've worked for the past decade, it specializes in working forests. So we own fee lands, which we call community forests, that we actively manage for timber sustainably. There's a management plan for each of those properties that a forester writes based on the conditions of the different stands of trees in that property. And we're thinking about the long-term health of that forest while also planning for timber harvests at different parts of the property at different times. And that helps to create our local supply of wood, which we all use on a daily basis as well for different products. So that's another kind of niche area. Wyndham Land Trust, where I'm going to be working soon and very excited about joining their staff. They're also interested in plant and animal habitat, but also I think places for people to walk and enjoy and learn about nature. And then there's American Farmland Trust. Some land trusts specialize in farmland soils or other different characteristics. And I don't know, Amy and Lois, if there are other examples you want to throw into the mix.
We have some very active municipal open space commissions and committees that are actively working on farmlands in particular in some communities and woodlands in other communities too. So your municipal conservation or open space commission or committee could also be a really good resource to help you figure out the right match.
And similarly, state of Connecticut, they have the state of Connecticut, especially if your land is adjacent to a state forest. They are often very interested in talking with landowners to see how they can expand the state forest system or wildlife management area, state park, et cetera. And there is a dedicated source of funding at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in Connecticut that is there for that purpose for the state of Connecticut to use. And interestingly, the state of Connecticut really doesn't like to purchase easements. They will hold easements through the funding program if a land trust purchases the property, but they don't like to hold easements themselves. So as Lisa's 100% right, that, land trusts are going to have a priority list. They're going to have a checklist. They're going to evaluate a piece of property, and they're going to determine, just like you're going to determine what you want. They're going to determine if they're the right partner for you.
Yeah, and just some other, general things to think about. Typically, larger parcels, of course, are of interest because there's an economy of scale, in the cost of protecting land, but also ecologically, larger open spaces are very beneficial for many outcomes, wildlife habitat, helping us to deal with a rapidly changing climate. Open spaces are more resilient. Having all those ecosystems be interconnected and watersheds functioning well, those are all really important outcomes of conservation. And even the configuration of your parcel. Is it already abutting another piece of conserved land? That's usually a benefit. Or sometimes, land trusts are looking to further connect these open spaces that are permanently protected, and thinking about how wildlife move across the landscape and creating those wildlife corridors, and maybe constantly expanding them in really critical areas. So all those things can be really beneficial if your property has, some characteristics that fall into those categories. And I was just going to share a little bit about my specific family situation, which had an outcome of conservation, happily for me, and bounce some ideas off of Amy about that. So in my case, I was the youngest of 5 kids, and my dad passed away, and my mom ended up spending the last few years of her life in a nursing home. And they had not really made advanced plans for what was going to happen to the 50-acre, farm that had been in the family for generations, other than, oh, it's going to the kids, right? Which sounds simple, but really is a complicated thing to figure out. And so, my siblings and I had to do that work. And, luckily we weren't forced to sell the land in order to pay for the nursing home bills. But that is a point of learning for folks. You may want to check out long-term care insurance options, because if you don't have that protection, as my parents didn't, there are these look back periods. So if you're going to apply for Medicaid to pay for nursing home care, and it can be very expensive, like $10,000 a month, or I haven't checked the latest, but that's what it was at the time in that vicinity. That can drain your family's assets very quickly. And, you might be forced to sell the land, even if your conservation is still something that folks would like to see as an outcome. And so, I know some families do something like they actually think about it and talk about it as a family and decide that, oh, we're going to transfer part of this land to heirs ahead of time because they kind of have figured out that scenario. And I don't know, Amy, if you have any, advice about that or examples. In my case, we ended up figuring out how to do that after my parents had passed, but maybe folks can be more proactive about it in some cases.
Well, the 2 examples that I was thinking of, Lisa, without commenting on your family situation, I mean, let me just preface it by saying that this is why it is so important to be working with a financial or legal advisor that really knows you and your estate plans well, and your financial situation well, because that type of scenario I don't think is unusual. But I will say the 2 scenarios that I did want to talk about. The first one involved an individual who wanted to conserve his land. Part of it was farmland and part of it was forest land. And the forest land actually did abut some state forest land. So I represented, this is when I was practicing in law, and I represented this landowner, and the local land trust was a partner in this transaction. So at the end of the day, what they wound up doing was transferring title to part of the property, retaining another part of the property so it could still be farmed, but it was subject to a federal agricultural easement that made sure that the property was going to stay in farming, but that it was a source of compensation for the landowner that the land trust could use. The house that the gentleman was living in was cut out of this deal completely. And
Hmm.
when he walked away, he had a conservation easement. He had the land trust owning the Woodlands area. It was subject to a conservation easement in favor of the state of Connecticut because the state had provided funding. The agricultural portion was subject to a federal easement because they had received money from the federal government in that way. He still owned his house and enough land around the house so that it was still under zoning, a conforming lot, and could be sold separately. So all of his conservation goals were met. He received some income so he could pay off his mortgage. He still was in the house and he could sell his house at any time. Another transaction that came to mind, Lisa, when you were talking was a gentleman that I also represented who wanted to stay in his house, but he also wanted to make sure that the property was conserved. So he transferred title to the property to the land trust, but he retained a life interest. He stayed there subject to a life estate. And then when he died, in accordance with the agreement and then in his will, full title went to the land trust, free of any types of encumbrances. So this landowner who he worked his land, he loved his land, and he worked with the land trust so that even though they owned title to the property, he was able to live in his house. He was also able to continue to work his land through an agreement with the land trust. So when I said to you in the beginning, you know, that easements can be flexible, you know, these agreements just generally can be flexible. And that's why it is so important, as you were saying, Lisa, for families to sit down and really understand what their needs are. Not only their emotional connection to the land, but what their financial interests might be as well, or needs might be in terms of their planning for the future.
Good advice. Start early, right? As early as you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a good feeling, I think, to have that planning in place and know that your land is going to be taken care of in a way that it needs to be.
So do we have questions? I can bring up a couple other things, but probably we want to start answering questions if folks have them in the chat or.
There's nothing in the chat so far, so I'll encourage people to start putting their questions in and we'll get to them. But Lisa, if you do want to discuss.
Okay. Well, let's see. I guess the other thing I was going to ask was just if you have any suggestions, Lois, and Amy, for how to encourage those kind of difficult conversations. We talked a bit about this in one of the previous sessions, but you know, it is really important for families to be talking about this, but who wants to think about, you know, what the world's going to be like after they're no longer here? So it can be really challenging. And I don't know if you've heard of examples of how people have done it successfully. You know, a special gathering, a family meeting or something, or, you know, what has worked that you've seen?
I think you can go to your next family gathering and say, "Hey, I attended this really interesting webinar. Did you know that there's all kinds of conservation options out there?" And it started me thinking about our property and maybe, you know, we should look into some options here. Is anybody interested? You know, use something like this to start the ball rolling. One of the things I do want to emphasize, though, is the amount of time it takes to go through the whole process. There is you're never too early to start those conversations. You know, you can see from Amy's slides that even when you have a good sense of what your goals are and you have a land trust or other partner who may be aligned with you, it can still take a long time to go through all of those steps. And when you add something more complicated like state grant money to help with a purchase, or a federal easement on agricultural piece or a forestry piece, it can take years. Have had some experience with some of the federal programs, and the easements could take 7, 8 years. I mean, it's crazy how long to, you know, the whole process can take. So it's never too early to start those conversations. You've just got to do it. Don't
You,
delay.
you
Find a
know,
way.
Lois, I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. And that in the example that I shared of the gentleman who wanted to stay continue to own his house with the land around it. I mean, that from beginning to end, that took 7 years just to get through all of the due diligence because, it's easy for me to list on a slide, get a title search done, right? But it's another thing to get a title search done and then find, oh my gosh, there are some issues here. Everything from an encroaching fence from a neighbor to maybe some questionable farm dumps and things that have to get cleaned up. And so the sooner you start, the better, just as Lois said. And this gentleman also fell ill during the process. And when it was all over, I remember he said to me, thank goodness we started when we did. He had a son who really didn't care whether the land stayed conserved, or became conserved or not. I was really interested in just making sure that they got some compensation for it, and really wasn't aware that you can get compensation for land and still conserve it, that it's not an either or proposition. So I think that's another item to keep in mind, that if there are some family members who do own interest in the property and they might not share the same, affection for the land that you do, and they are, or legitimately concerned about, the needs for financial support in the future, and looking to the land as a major asset for that purpose, you can say to them, conserving our land doesn't necessarily mean donating it. We can sell our land subject to a lot of the things that I mentioned before, like the appraised value and things like that. But it's done more often than not.
I guess one other piece of that might be young people and, youth, engaging them in if you're a part of a large family. And I know that some folks I've heard of will host like an annual gathering or something on the land, and maybe not Thanksgiving is the best time to get into these legal sort of discussions, but maybe setting aside a separate time for those tougher talks. But just having an opportunity to do fun things like, going sledding or something, or having a special place where the family walks and talks together can, I think, be really meaningful and helpful.
We did have a question in the chat, which I can bring to you guys. Charlene asked, how does one find land conservation financial and legal advisors?
So Lois, I don't, does Last Green Valley have a list of service providers that you do not?
No, we do not. We do not. And it is a concern because while we have plenty of competent, qualified attorneys and financial advisors in the region, they do not all have direct sort of land conservation experience in thinking about the big picture and, having a sense of what all these different options are. So we would probably be calling you, among other things. We would also, for example, if someone reached out to us, we would call around to some of our local land trusts and say, who have you worked with recently? We might call Joshua's or Wyndham and say, hey, who are the attorneys that you've worked with that seem to have an understanding here and an ability to work a good deal, and
Yeah.
recommend those.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that other than I just put my email address here in the chat. Feel free to email us. We do have a list of attorneys, and we try to build on that list because, as Lois said, it not every attorney, even real estate attorneys, have that expertise in land conservation. It is somewhat nuanced, and so we have a list of attorneys that land trusts often use. Who's asking? Eric, that is such a great, Carly, I don't know if you want to read that, but I just saw it
Yeah,
pop
I would
up.
be happy to. So Eric Thomas just put in the chat, is there an event or platform where land conservation experienced financial and advisors can meet and greet for a brief talk and exchange of contact information? Um, they can follow up with appointments if desired. Perhaps the CTLC conference is one place that may be so large a format to be intimidating for LOs new to this potentially early conversation. Maybe a regional hosting via TLGV, for instance, not for TLGV, but to host a connection opportunity.
Mhm. I mean, I'm
Well,
happy to start that, Lois. I mean, we would always be happy to partner with the Last Green Valley to put our heads together to try and get attorneys and financial advisors in the room. You would think that they would run towards something like that because it's a potential to gain new clients. But what we found in developing this list of attorneys is that they're all really busy and that it's hard to get them together. Eric, we've tried that. We've tried it. But I think it's always good to try again, right? Just because it didn't work a year or two ago, it doesn't mean that there is no interest. And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And Ann mentioned in the chat, one of our local attorneys, Ayla Evans, who is incredibly experienced and competent, but she now works for a nonprofit, I think Land Trust Alliance. And so she's not involved in representing landowners, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
but Ayla is somebody that we're in contact with, and she
Yep.
might have some names to provide.
Yep. Yep.
But feel free to contact me, and I can, depending upon where you live, I could probably refer you to someone in your area. And many of the attorneys that we do have on our list, they might be located in one part of the state, but they are happy to work with landowners throughout the state. When I give presentations like this, it makes me want to go practice law again. I don't know about you, Lois. I get excited when I start going through all the slides on doing a deal because it's interesting and it's exciting. And it's, like I said, when you get to the end of the process, it's very, very satisfying for the landowner and the land trust.
Any more questions?
sorry about that. Just call from the vet. Everything's fine, but
Oh, no problem. I don't see any more questions.
No more questions?
Can
Okay.
give it a couple more minutes if people want to continue to ask.
yeah, I guess I was just going to mention that, we had this series, the first workshop kind of focused on helping landowners identify your own goals for why you love your land, how you like to spend time there, maybe different actions you could take to support wildlife habitat, or other things like recreation and creating trails. And then the second workshop focused a little bit more on stewardship. And it is a great idea if you have the opportunity to meet with a forester and gather some of the information that they can help you understand, the kinds of trees that are growing on your property and what type of habitats that supports. And think about if you want to take any actions to support, say, habitat for bird species, for example, or dealing with invasive plants and that kind of thing. And there are many funding sources that are available to support landowners in taking some of those steps. So that's a whole nother session, which we focused on a little bit more last time. But even as you're thinking about conservation, you can also maybe think about stewardship as well. And they're kind of different paths that you can go down, but also sometimes you can walk both of them simultaneously. So just wanted to mention that. I think there is one more question, maybe. Yep.
That's a great question.
Yeah, Bruce asked, what happens if a land trust dissolves? What are the arrangements or agreements that were made?
Yeah, so a land trust as a nonprofit is required in its organizational documents that are filed with the state of Connecticut to either identify a successor in that event, or if they haven't, the Attorney General's office, there's a charities unit, would step in and they would make sure that any agreements that were in place with that land trust would pass on to another land trust or conservation organization with a like mission. So that is something that, again, it would have to be in the organizational documents. And it's something to ask. There's nothing wrong with asking a land trust about who, in the unlikely event that your that you go out of business, or if you merge with another land trust, you know, what is the arrangement that would be made? That's an excellent question, Bruce.
Yeah. Amy, can you mention something about accreditation
Yeah,
and what that means
sure.
for a land trust?
Yes, absolutely. So the National Land Trust Accreditation Commission, which is an arm of the National Land Trust Alliance, that's the umbrella for all the land trusts in the country. There's about 1,700 land trusts nationally, just like we're the umbrella for the state land trusts. The Land Trust Accreditation Commission has a program where land trusts can become accredited. And that means that they get the seal of approval after going through a very rigorous process of making sure that they are acting in conformance with something called the Land Trust Standards and Practices, which are the ethical and legal and technical guidelines that land trusts should be following to ensure, again, that they can uphold their mission in perpetuity. Now, not all land trusts are accredited, and if it's not accredited, it doesn't mean that it's not a good land trust that you should work with, but it is something to ask and make sure that they are following best practices, the standards and practices. And if they are accredited, then there's, again, this objective seal of approval that is provided by this accreditation commission, and it's a very rigorous process. You know, we have found that land trusts that even if they don't ultimately get accredited, but follow the process and go through the work that is required to make sure they are abiding by standards and practices, are in much better shape than those that don't. Does that answer the question, Lois? Yeah. And there's a list of accredited land trusts. Actually, if you go to the Find a Land Trust button on our website and you find a land trust, we have a little notation there if they are accredited or not.
All right. Any more? Any final questions? In, oh, thanks.
Bill Reed, of course. So
Thanks,
great job,
Bill's
Bill.
Amy, Lois, and Lisa.
Nice
Putting
to
the
see your
series
face.
together.
Well, nice to see your name, Bill. I haven't seen your face yet.
Oh, Eric Thomas
Um,
had another
Hi, there he
All right,
question.
is.
Eric.
Hi, Bill.
Can presenters provide some current insight on land trusts or town open space committees connecting the landowners who are taking advantage of local PA 490 tax assessment for possible more formal land conservation measures down the road?
Interesting.
So, you know what? I had PA 490 in one of my slides, I think, and I just glossed right over it when I was going on and on. So, Public Act 490 is a Connecticut statutory provision that provides landowners that whose land can meet certain classifications that are in statute, and in one case, you know, by towns, to get basically a reduced real estate tax assessment based upon the current use of their property meeting the statutory requirements. So Public Act 490 categories are forest land, agricultural land, and in some cases, not all towns follow this or offer it, open space. And if you apply to your local assessor and you meet the requirements for those classifications, then your real estate taxes would be based upon the current use of the property for one of those categories, rather than its highest and best use potential, which of course would mean its development potential, and your real estate properties would be based upon a much higher assessed value. So it is something that you agree to put your property into a 490 classification once it's approved by the town. If you keep it in that classification for 10 years and then take it out, there's no penalty. If you decide to take it out of that classification and either use it yourself for development purposes or convey it for development purposes, there would be a penalty, and it would basically be the amount of back taxes that you would owe had it been assessed at its highest and best use as opposed to current use. So there's a great guide on PA 490 that the Farm Bureau offers, and I think the Connecticut Farmland Trust also has it on their website. as well, but you could, Department of Agriculture has a page on it. If you just Google Public Act 490 in Connecticut, you'll get a whole lot of resources on it. But you could talk to your assessor as well.
Yes, and in Massachusetts, it's Chapter 61, and there's subsections for different types of land as well. But Eric's comment there, I get what you're saying. I think is that this is a group of landowners that, by entering into that program, probably don't have immediate plans to, sell for development or subdivide. So I think they are a great group of folks to try to reach out to, help have these conversations about whether conservation might be of interest. So I think it's a good suggestion.
And I think for some landowners, I really didn't read it that way. Eric, I'm sorry if I misinterpreted what you were asking, but that is an overview of 490. But I think it's interesting here in Connecticut because, 490 is not permanent land conservation. It's a step forward for sure. And for some landowners, it's like dipping their toe in the water, and then moving on to more permanent conservation options like we discussed tonight.
Well, I think too, if I might add, I think for older landowners, older forest landowners that have owned their property for many years, it's critically important to them financially. My family's owned forest land in New Hampshire for many years, and the current use program there is very important for how much we have to pay in property tax. But clearly, they are the type of people that should be more inclined to conserve their land because more than likely they have larger amounts of it. What is the minimum acreage in Connecticut? Is it 20 acres? To get into PA 490?
I think it's
I think there is-
25.
I think it's
Yeah.
25 for forest, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in the towns that adopt open space, it's 10.
Right, and I'm not sure if it needs to be contiguous or not, but I assume it does. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's
The
really
rules get very
well-
intricate, so it is a good idea to read the guide or talk to a
up, look it
forester
up
who
first.
really knows it.
Yeah, and sorry, Eric, like I said, I didn't interpret your question correctly, but I do think a lot of landowners do go and they look to see who has put their land in 490, and it's a good place to start in terms of engagement.
All right, last chance. Or if not, then thank you so much to everyone who attended the webinars. Thank you very much to Amy. Thank you very much to Lisa for helping us put together all 3 of these webinars. And we will get the slides put together up on our website. We will also put the recording up on their website. Might take a couple days. It'll probably be next week before it happens. But we will make sure to have the resources up on our website that you can check anytime you want. And we hope you would share the recording and share the resources with other people that might be interested in conservation. So thank you very
Lois,
much.
Lois, I
Yep.
wondered if you wanted to put the link in there just to what we have up there from the first 2,
Yeah.
if it's handy, but I guess you'll send it.
Carly,
I'm doing it right now.
Okay,
thank you.
great. Yeah, and I
Yep.
just wanted to say, thank you to Amy for all your time and to Lois and her team as well for supporting this series because we've talked about it for quite a while when I was on the board at the last Green Valley, and I'm very excited that we've made it happen. So, and hopefully we'll do more of this in the future. So, thank you.
All
There
right,
we go.
link
Here's
is
the
in the
link.
chat. Yep.
All right. Great. Well, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Appreciate it. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.